Hello everyone, this is Mel here. Welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to take a look at Heroquest. So this is the first light edition, which is kind of the smaller edition where instead of coming with the miniatures, it comes with the traditional cardboard. So it is one that I purchased last December and during the Black Friday sales, and I've been enjoying it quite a lot. So I'm trying to get back to dungeon crawling myself, but it's kind of difficult to bring out the big games that are like the League of Legends or Warhammer Quest, simply because of the number of tracking, or specifically because the game setup is requiring a modular dungeon setup. So I've been looking around and I just realized that probably HeroQuest is the best option out of all of them. Now, one of the problems with HeroQuest is that it is not designed for so for solo play, and I'm a purely solo gamer. And yes, there is of course the app, but unfortunately, it is also something that I'm trying to avoid, not because of just pure dislike of app games, but because I'm someone who always wants to apply home brews, or specific modifying the game into my liking. And if you play with the official app, it's obviously a little bit more difficult to do that. And the second part is because I'm not particularly interested in the official quest. Now, obviously, a lot of people have nostalgic feelings to Hero Quest, but I didn't grow up with Hero Quest, right? And particularly, what I find Hero Quest is that it is a kind of a dungeon crawl that requires the dungeon master to fill in a lot of gaps, right? They need to put in a lot of efforts to fill in the missing parts, to create the atmosphere, and sometimes even just changing things on the go, so that the players have a better experience. So the quests are designed to be a kind of a structure to do that, rather than a specific rules that you have to follow to the line. And the other thing is, I'm still, in my opinion, I still like randomly generated quests more than a specifically designed pathways. It is why I like Warhammer Quest, for example, and it is just more appealing to myself. So obviously, there are a few options. There's the quite popular Axian Quest, which is unfortunately very expensive to get in where I live, which is in the UK. It is obviously a drive-through RPG printed card pack, and it takes a fortune to actually get that shipped. Um, the other options are, there are a few options around. There is obviously the traditional way of using rolling tables, which I found that there are quite a few resources. The one that I particularly like is this one. This is the Quick Reference Advanced Hero Quest Random Generation, um, and this is created by let me just quickly check, Beetle Guys. And this is not just a random generator. It also actually includes a whole lot of additional rules for visiting a village, and buying houses, going to the inn. There is the random quests, and there's a whole bunch of bestiaries. I think it's almost the whole um, old Warhammer Quest world, old world bestiaries. So you can see that it has the femurs, the ogres with different levels. So it's really impressive resources that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about. And this is particularly useful because it actually incorporates the newer resources, the newer heroes, for example, you can see there's the bard over here, there's the druid, there's the uh, knight, and with their stats and also the equipment and also with their skills as well. So you can see there's the abilities of the knight. So it's very handy as a resource to check up the stacks of the enemy. And it also has its own random generation table, which is very useful. It goes from generating a specific dungeon, like the path, like the hazard rooms, types, and so forth, to what kind of things you found in the room. But I personally find it very useful, but I do not want to play it as the main way to generate the dungeon. And the reason is because I find a lot of times it requires too much dice rolling. You just keep rolling for the next thing, and it's just not as organic as drawing a card, looking at what the card is saying, and then populate the dungeon that way. And that is the best thing about having cards in your hero quest, or in your dungeon crawls. Unfortunately, in the base game, in what comes in the hero quest box set, the cards, there are a lot of cards, but not a lot of them are useful in terms of generating a random dungeon, for example. There's obviously lots of good cards, like the stats of the enemies. It's always handy to have that, but I mean, you can probably do a random generation by picking one card, but it doesn't tell you how many you have, how many enemies you're going to have. It requires the DM who decide the dungeon to tell you there will be 2 goblins, 4 goblins, 6 goblins, or whatever it is. So, some other games will have like a random numbers generated included in here, but not for Hero Quest. And again, there's a lot of other uses like the spell cost. It's good to have them as cost instead of like written in your character sheet and have it as is. But in general, a lot of the cards in the base game doesn't really help you populate a dungeon or generate a dungeon. So the question is, what then do we use to get that feeling that something like Axian Quest can provide without paying the big bucks? So I've been searching around for a while now, and I think I've come up with quite a nice setup that requires not a lot of effort. And that's also one thing I do want to mention is I do not want to create my own tables. I can create my own cards, but I don't want to. Just because where I am at life with 3-year-old, I just don't have that time to create cards. But I do have time to print out cards that are already made by others online. And the particular set that I'm looking at today is a module called Dungeon. So I can't remember who created it, but he posted it a while ago on the year old Inc. Obviously year old Inc. in the Facebook group, and it is designed more for modular dungeons. So it's not designed for the original HeroQuest kind of the dungeon board. But I figure that if I apply the same rules that is in the Axian Quest, and that rules is free, by the way, that you can find it on online. I think we can get to something that's very similar, and that's very easy to do. So I have not even created a proper card. You can see I just used the sleeve method. Just basically print it out and cut it out and do like a sandwich. I didn't even put a playing card in the middle. And I think I got a really good experience. So what you get from this dungeon solo module So what you do have is, first of all, a deck of dungeon cards. So this comes with so there's an indication of what kind of room it is, whether it's a boss room, or is it like a tiny room, a corridor, and so forth. And you can see it does come with a modular dungeon, but we can ignore the kind of the size or the shape of dungeon, because what is important for us is whether we need to populate it with enemies, or in this case, do we populate it with an event? So very similar to in Warhammer Quest, where you draw a specific room. It says, draw an event card. This is basically what it is. It will also tell you whether you want to populate it with furnitures, and it comes with a separate furniture deck. It will tell you whether you want to populate it with like combat event cards, uh, or you populate it with enemies. So in this case, the ones with populated with combat event cards also come with these codex. So you can see it comes with like 1A, 1D, 2A, 4C, and something like that. And what these are is basically how many enemies and what enemies you want to populate. Because in this module, it also comes with a specific monster list. So there's quite a few of them, but the clever part is you can very easily create your own set. So I'll give you an example. If we look at this first one, this is Sir Ragnar's list. So you can see if I draw this as the monster or the kind of type of monsters that we will encounter in this dungeon, then whenever we draw a dungeon card with something like combats and enemy populations, then you can see there will be two 1As in this room. So in this case, it will be two goblins, and then one 1D, which is will be the orc, and there will be one C, which is the zombie. Now, anything that start with 2, 3, 4, 5, these are going to be the level of the dungeon. So in this module, you're expected to go multiple levels instead of just one level of the dungeon. So you will start with level 1. Once you cleared kind of, or you found the leather to the dungeon level 2, then you will start seeing more difficult enemies. So once you go to the level 2, when you encounter a similar card like this again, then instead of the 1As, 1C, 1D, you also start encounter additionally the 2A, which in this case is the abominations. And then further down, you keep populating more enemies when you go down. And if you go to the very end to the boss levels, which is the boss rooms, you can see it basically populates a lot of things, including 5D, which is in this case we have additional orc. Um, there will be 4C, the goblin, and there will be the boss over here, which is the large abomination. And what it says is you will have basically additional body points based on the dungeon level that you're going through. So it will be 2 plus the dungeon level. And there will be special rules included, for example, at the end. So this combination allows us to basically generate a random quest and also a kind of, sorry, a random dungeon, very similar to what we can use or what we found in the Axian Quest. And on top of that, we do have other things like we have a deck of event cards, your classic event in the dungeon. Again, it's not a very thick card. I think there's 24 cards in this deck, but we all love event cards in the dungeon. Combat is, for a lot of us, is obstacles that we go through to get to the fun part, which is a lot of the cases the event, or in terms of combat, unexpected things that happens, that is the fun part. So you can see things like event like a way out. So suddenly there's like two goblins screaming, rush past you, screaming wildly. bumping into a hero, one drops a tattered map with an X on it. And then there's some instructions say, choose another reviewed room with an unopened door and roll a combat die. If the shield is rolled, open one of the unreviewed door in that room and place a corridor tile connected to it. Then put a stair token in that corridor. If a shield is not rolled, then choose another room and an opened door and roll again. If all the unopened door did not have a shield, then discard. So basically, you have found a a stair, the corridor that leads you to the additional exit. So you can basically use it as an emergency way to leave the dungeon. And there will be others like respy, so you can basically heal up here to regain body points, and there's caving classics, and sometimes there's nothing here, spear traps, and so forth. So really love this deck of small event cards. And on top of that, it comes with the combat event as well. So this is where a lot of the cases when you draw the enemies, you will also ask you to draw an additional combat event. So for example, if you look at these ones, it will just get pike. So these enemies are equipped with long rusty spears, sure to make getting close very dangerous. So whenever you move adjacent to an enemy from this area, test body 12. If the test is failed, then hero draws an injury card. So a whole bunch of events that would potentially happen during the event. Again, this is where the original Heroquest sometimes is, there's not a lot happening. We just keep populating with additional enemies, but things like the event during the combat is always makes things a bit more interesting. Even with the same set of enemies, you will get something different every time. So again, very small deck, about 24 cards, but very useful. On top of that, we have something like injury cards. So these are things like, if your heroes lose certain points of body points, or if you go through certain event, then you might get injured, and you got a hand injury, so your attack rolls are reduced by 1 die, for example. You have curse, for example, then you reduce your defense rolls by 1 for each token. So every time you get cursed, you put a token, and probably if you curse 3 times, then you just basically have no defense die at that point. And then it will tell you, how you can discard the tokens, the curse tokens. So again, mixing things very interesting. So again, not a lot of cards, just 8 cards, so 1 page of printing. But these makes things more interesting than the base game. So on top of that, we obviously have the quest, which is also very important. These are just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of generic quests, but what it's doing is basically giving like a very high level adventure tropes. So whether you want to defeat a menace, so basically defeat a boss in this case, and it will basically tell you to um, choose or create a monster list. In this case, you can just pick one of it to use, or if you want to face specific enemies, either from the base game or from homebrews, it's very easy because you all you need to do is basically have 8 enemies listed in the same format for every single kind of monster list. It starts with 1A is the easiest, 1B is slightly more difficult, 1C is more difficult than the previous one. So as long as you populate something like this with 8 rows in a kind of ascending difficulty number, and you can very easily do that by, for example, using like the body points plus attack points count. A lot of the cases, a lot of people, like Dungeon Dive, for example, he uses this to create like a tier system where goblins are probably the bottom of the tier because they only have one attack and also they have one body. But something like an orc or the ogre in the later expansion, they will be really much down in the in the bottom, for example, because of the number of hit points or body points plus attack points. It gets them to a very high tier. And you can create a themed list in this case as well, so you can have a whole bunch of orc to go through. If you have the expansions, then you can use those as well. And if you want to use these additional supplements that the community has created, then you can easily do that as well, because HeroQuest is a very easy game to create and your own DIY stuff, because ultimately you only have a few stats. You have your attack, defense, body, mind, and speed, and that's it. And to tell you if this is a very difficult thing, you just add the body point and the attack. So in this case, we have a red swarm here, which is 4 plus 4, which is 8. So it's probably put it in the middle pack. Definitely more difficult than something like a goblins and so forth. So again, very easy to create your tier list and your themed list if you have something like this from the using something like this from the community. And this is again this specific one by Beetle guys is the best one that I found. It's literally, I'm so surprised no one talks about it. This is just really well laid out. The additional rules is interesting. It adds a lot of layers that you can pick and choose what you want to use. There are things like, creating followers, men-at-arms, mercenaries that you have to kind of level up them as well. They will have their own skills. Your characters can also gain additional skills on top of your um, basic skills. So for magic users, they can have something like detect magic, dispel, identify magic, resist. And for fighters, they have something like dual wielding, taunt, berserker, battle weight, rage, fearless, and all sorts of additional rules. And I think specifically what I'm really impressed is the bestiaries, because it not only includes the base game ones and also a lot of the expansion enemies and also the NPCs, and it also have basically everything that you can think of in terms of a fantasy world bestiaries. So highly recommend it. But again, if we look back to the quest itself, so it's very simple. Pick and choose one of the monster list and then create a dungeon deck. In this case, you can basically say, if we look at the dungeon itself, depending on how many levels you want, it will say randomly determined a boss room card. So, there will be multiple boss rooms, so you can just randomly pick one. But what I do like to do specifically in this case is I do want to do something very similar to the Axian Quest, where the first boss rooms, or the first two boss rooms, depending on how many you want, are going to be like a clue room. So basically, you need to go through multiple boss rooms in order to get to the actual boss rooms. Because in that case, it will let how many rooms you won't basically and when you put this here in this case, like in Axian Quest, if you randomly pick the first one as the boss room, then based on the original rules from this dungeon solo rules, you just get it done, right? Because the idea of the original setup is you're supposed to do it very similar to Warhammer Quest, where you pick your boss room, pick a few more dungeon, and then randomize that. And on top of that, you add another deck. So in that case, if it's a modular dungeon, then you will at least go through maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 rooms and then the bottom 4 or 5, you don't know which one is the boss room. But if we want to use it as a modular deck room, sorry, a modular dungeon board, like the original ones, then we have to come up with a way to stop the players getting the very first boss rooms or the very first dungeon room as the boss room. So what I do is I normally put in 3 boss cards, and only until you get to the 3rd boss rooms, you're considered as finding the real boss rooms. So the first 2 are just going to be kind of your first clue. So the first one gives you a clue to get to the second one, and the second one gets you a clue to the third one. Thematically, you can obviously populate it with your own random dungeon, random theme tables, or you can just take it as is and just say this is the first clue, second clue, and the third one is the main dungeon room. So in that case, what we can do is we can basically follow all the rules by Axian Quest, in which case what we're going to do is we're going to just randomly pick maybe 10 cards depending on the size of the dungeon. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'll just probably take 1 off. And then in this case, if we're going to say we just want to defeat the menace, and the menace is just going to be whatever the boss in the very final room, what we can do is do it in the same rules as Axian Quest, where we randomly determined where to put it. There are a few ways that you can do it. For example, you can do a D4 to say this is the D1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then if you roll a dice to say, all right, this is 1. So we will use this side of the quest to start with the first stairs. In this case, I'm just gonna use this. For example, if I say, this is where one of the rooms will be the staircase, I just need to randomly populate 10 rooms with these cards. So I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And based on the Axian Quest, what you always do is you're going to put the first room always has a door. Now you can put it here, 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 as long as it leads to the next card. And every time you open another room, you will always first read what event you have. So in this case, we have the first boss room, which will be the first clue. So you encounter the furniture, you encounter the combat, and then once it's done, then you are always allowed to put up to 2 doors, that leads to the next kind of objective. In this case, the next objective will be the dungeon room. So we can put one here, and if we want, we can also put another one here, but that will means that we have to roll 2d6 dice, because every door that you put, you need to roll a d6. If you get either 1 or 6, depending on how you want to determine it, you will get a wandering monster, and the wandering monster will be the last encounters that you have, last monster encounter. In this case, if you roll a 1, in this case that we did roll a 1, you will need to encounter whatever is on the last dungeon card that you have drawn with enemies on again. So it is obviously, in this case, you want to maybe just have 1 die. So you want to have just 1 room. So in this case, we'll put it here, and which means that we'll go around in circles before we can encounter the ones below. But yeah, that's just basically a very high level discussion about Axian Quest. Sorry, not Axian Quest, about how we can use the dungeon solo modules to create a very similar experience as the Axian Quest without paying the amount of money. This is completely free module. I don't think a lot of people use it because of the original design that is a modular dungeon. A lot of people just want to use the board because that's the same reason for me getting HeroQuest is because I like the design of the dungeon board. It's very compact. The game box is very small, as you can see, especially the first light version, because without the miniatures, you can literally fit everything into such a tiny box. So everything that I am showing you, including the additional deck that I have printed out, and on top of that, I've also put in a whole bunch of standees. These are standees that comes from the League of Dungeoneers that I've backed, I've received. That again is one of those games I just don't have time to play. And I'm also finding ways to play that with this board as well, which is also one of the reasons why I want HeroQuest, because I like this board. This is such a great board, and it is double-sided as well. So on the other side of it, it even has a um, cave-in, design, which just means that you have a lot more variety to use. So yeah, so I'm gonna figure out ways to use the this board to play League of Dungeoneers, which I definitely think it can be done. But for this purposes, I'm using this to allow me to use these hero standees to represent the additional heroes included in the expansions and also in the home brews. And because I actually didn't buy any of the HeroQuest expansions, I don't think I need them because all they add is pretty much things like additional heroes and additional monsters. And even that, a lot of the monsters are repeated monsters. HeroQuest is infamous for providing the same skeletons, goblins. I mean, the NATO ones, the new HeroQuest is a lot better, but still there's a lot of the same mercenary groups. I mean, the same human enemies with the same stat and not a lot of specific skills. So yeah, so that's basically how I'm gonna play HeroQuest with the dungeon model, which again is not designed originally for the original board. It's designed for modular boards, but I think it can very easily be adopted in a similar way as Axian Quest. And it is just great. I find it is great because of the classic things that we can get from other great dungeon crawls such as HmmNessQuest, the event cards. And on top of that, it includes the combat events. Very easy to create your own monster list. You just need a paper, put down 8 monsters, and that's it. That's your themed dungeon. It comes with furniture cards as well. So again, when you're being told to draw some furnitures, actually just on top of that, it doesn't come with a furniture deck. So my furniture deck is actually coming from another module, which is also on the Facebook group. But the original ones just comes with one chest. So this is basically say opening chest, roll 2d6 and get some random items. But I've actually got another module, which is I can't remember the name of this, but I'll put it on the screen. But this is actually quite interesting because it gives us the classic furniture. So a alchemist bench, but then you roll 2d6 because you will get different results. So in this case, you can see the hero builds a strange liquid, losing 1 body point if you roll 2 out of 2d6, and 3 to 6 you get, sorry, 3 to 10 you get nothing. Now the Sargon takes 1 scout encounter, so this is basically when you have more encounters, you will throw in a wandering monster. Again, with this rules, it's very easy. You just find the last dungeon card that you encountered with the monsters, and you can put that in. And then you have other things like thrones, do a search and you give you a different result. So I just printed it out. I just used kind of the same bag like a furniture cart. So again, every time the dungeon cards ask me to draw furniture, I just draw one of these cards. So assuming that there is in this case, for example, a fireplace. So what we can do, right? So uh, very easy, very straightforward. Similar again, Axian Quest is very similar rules where you draw a dungeon. It will tell you whether you're an enemy or the furniture and what type of furniture, if it's a statue or something. But again, very easy to replicate that same random dungeon generation with this module. Um, because of these cards are pre-made, all you need to do is print them in color, even black and white if you just want to give it a try. That's what I did. I found it really good. So you can see actually these cards were supposed to be in color, but I just printed it back with color because I don't mind the content in black and white, but the actual versions that you will get, it comes with background like a yellow parchment color as well, which is very classic as well, which I really enjoyed as well. So yeah, that's it. So overall, I'm really happy with the HeroQuest First Light. I'm not generally a fan of HeroQuest, the game that it shipped with. I didn't grow up with it, as I mentioned. Um, I didn't have any nostalgic values, feelings to it. In fact, I previously owned the original version. Um, which is the UK version as well, which is the worst version, unfortunately, because of the monster design and the lack of body points and stuff like that. But yeah, I wasn't a fan. I watched the bots video, why Hero Quest was great. I felt that it must be a great game. I bought it, played it, and just realized back in maybe 2017, back then, you know, it's just not a very good solo game. There's not a lot that you can do back then. There were obviously back then it was already 20 years, almost 20 years worth of, uh, community generated content, but not a lot of people create things like cards back then because, the lack of AI tools, of course, and, just because people moved on, right? But with the new Hero Quest, a lot more people just came back. They created great content, but so far missing as a free alternatives for Axian Quest is, there's just no such thing at the moment as a free alternatives or free print and play or just free or paid print and play version of Axian Quest. So the Dungeon Solo, highly recommended. It's really great. And obviously you can see on top of this, I've also printed some of these amazing cards, right? These are just amazing. These are, I think, created by the HmmNessQuest. So he created a whole bunch of skill based on this new version of HeroQuest. So obviously the new version of HeroQuest, the monk characters have their own quest. The elves have their own sets of spells these days, and these are all created not just a replica of the ones that you get from the expansions, but this is recreated with more details, with more specific rules, so with different art. And this is same 8 cards. I think the name is the same 8 cards, but they do more things. They give you more options, and they look better than I think, in my opinion, they look better than the official offering. And these are free to print and play. So I actually, I did order it. The one of the expansions together with this. I think it was the one with came with the elf spells, and I looked into it. There's just not a lot of things in it. I mean, it's very cheap. This on sale all the time. It's not very expensive, but again, you know, if you want, you can just get a very basic Hero Quest First Light, which cost me 20 quid, so £20 during the Black Friday. And yeah, it gives me exactly what I want at this stage. I don't need miniatures. I love cardboards. I have my own cardboards from League of Dungeoneers, which is, there's enough for me to fill in every single types of enemies in the expansions. And on top of that, on homebrew, so I've already selected the ones that are related, the skeleton archer, for example, some of the elves, the snakes, the wraith, which I used to represent some of the, I think, the ghosts, the fallen light knight, which represents the enemies that you can see in the expansions, ogre, obviously, in the ogre expansion. So yeah, this is great. So I just want to share a little bit of how people can play um, HeroQuest similar to the Axian Quest module without paying that money. It is a free and play alternative, which is called Dungeon Solo, which I find really good. I think it does some things better than Axian Quest. Obviously, Axian Quest has more variety. At the end of the day, the event is, there's 24 cards only. Combat cards is 24 cards only. Furnitures, that's as much as we have. The quests, the main quests, there's only 6, but again, they're very typical quests, right? They're just like escape or do something in certain number of terms. Defeat an enemy, rescue someone. But that's the beauty of it, because the rest of the details is filled in by ourselves. We can easily use any solo RPG tables to fill that details in. So yeah, so that's it. So for any people who are looking for some alternatives, this is my recommendation for people on the other side of the pond, like myself, Europe, who can't get Axian Quest. My recommendation is just print Dungeon Solo. If you don't want to do it yourself, I think you can maybe do it professionally. Again, it's still a lot cheaper than buying Axian Quest, but you get maybe 90% of the same experience that you can get by uh, by using this deck. And I really loved it, and it is just great, and everything, all of that, all of these things that you can see in this small box, just perfect. So thank you for watching. I will talk to you guys later. Thank you. Bye bye.